Hi friends, this is Caitlin. Welcome to the next installment of my Halloween 2025 series. Today we're going to be making the coolest mixed media super fun card using the Trinity Stamps Boo Brew dies. We're making this pumpkin spice latte. I've had this die set for a year now and I haven't gotten to use it. So I'm finally using it. It will not be the last time by any means. It's so cute, and I definitely still need to make the jack-o'-lantern version. So to start out, I wanted to make this really fun, kind of messy, distressed, mixed media style background. So I'm taking this super thin Halloween paper from one of those paper books from Michael's. This stuff is crazy, printer paper, copy paper thin. But it makes it work really well for something like this where you're going to be layering it and you don't need it to be a thick cardstock. So I started out by ripping it diagonally across and then trimmed up the sides, the straight sides, so that I would have this kind of nice gap in the texture there. And it's Halloweeny because the words on it are Halloweeny, but you could do this with whatever. I just kind of wanted that newspaper look. My vibe for this was kind of messy coffee house, spooky coffee house table. So there's going to be coffee rings. It's somebody ripped out the pages of the book they were reading. That's kind of the vibe. So I'm going in with carved pumpkin, obviously, distress ink, and starting to create a little bit of a vignette feel, inking all the way around. I did take some of that carved pumpkin into the center. Now I'm going in with Crackling Campfire, and that one I'm going to focus more on those outer corners and leave the center nice and bright. Then I'm coming in with ground espresso, again fitting for the whole coffee house kind of vibe. And that I'm really keeping right on the edges of my cardstock. As you can see, I did decide that my paper was a little too clean, my printed paper, pattern paper. So I also added just a little bit of that, whatever was left on my blender, to those edges of the paper to grunge them up. I also took a little bit of my orange carved pumpkin, stamped it onto my glass mat and added some water. I'm doing the same thing now with I want to say this is walnut stain, but I'll double check it. I'm taking this little pinch pot that I use for organizing my die cuts if I'm working on a big project, and I'm rolling the bottom of it into a spray of that distress ink and then, or distress spray stain, and then pressing it into the cardstock so it creates those rings. That's what's going to give us that coffee house cup ring look. So I also just kind of pressed my paper into the leftovers, what was left on the glass mat. I'm adding some water. I'm going to go in with Mulled Cider Mica spray, which has the most beautiful shimmer when it dries. And if something seems too wet, because I'm working on regular cardstock and not a heavyweight or a watercolor paper or anything, if something seemed like it was puddling too much, I just flipped it over into that microfiber towel. So if you saw me flipping it back and forth, that's why. There were a couple spots where my pattern paper had kind of flipped over, curled over on itself, and I really liked how that looked. So I just added little tiny bits of liquid glue under those spots so that they stay that way. So sometimes your paper will distress itself and sometimes it needs encouragement to stay that way. So do whatever you need to do to get the look you're going for. I die cut all of my pieces to make this pumpkin mug out of Copic Express It paper. And I'm going to be going in with a few different layers of my Copic sketch markers here. I'm starting out with this E19. We're going to end up bringing in an even darker marker over this. But I do find that it is much easier to, err on the side of caution and go in with a more lighter or medium color to start out. because you can always make it darker, but it's going to be hard to make it lighter. So I kept that E19 right on the edges. I'm going in now with YR18 and starting to fill in that base part of the mug. Our little pumpkin like sections are going to go on top of this. So I really wasn't worried about getting the smoothest blend ever because it's going to be covered up. So here I'm starting to add more of that E19, but we're going to come back in a second and, like I said, add that even darker color in. And you can see I did leave some highlight around the top, bottom, and on that handle. That's where we're going to be adding this YR15 for just like a little bit of extra golden kind of brightness. So here's where we're going to darken things up. I held the cup up to that background and it was so dark that the cup just looked out of place. So I'm coming in with that E39 and we're just going to kind of layer and then blend in our colors from before right up against them. So we're still using those original colors. We're just adding in a fourth color, which makes sense because there is a lot of space here, right? We have more room to blend out that darkness. I forgot to say before, the back panel of our card front is a coffee shop, super dark brown cardstock from Pink and Main that I just ordered for myself. And it is the most beautiful brown. So that's what's going to be our little thin mat. Our main panel is trimmed down to 4 by 5.25. And then all of these elements are going to get put on top of our messy background that we made. I just had so much fun with this background. I love the look of these like mixed media, super distressed, grungy, like Halloween projects, but I have a hard time figuring out how to do the coloring that I love with that style. In my head, a lot of times my coloring feels very clean and neat, and those backgrounds feel very chaotic. And so I have a hard time making them get along in my head. But this project came out great. It was not a struggle in any way to do any of this. If you watched my last video, I did struggle with making some like a messy background to die cut leaves from, and it just wasn't working. It didn't fit what I wanted it to do. This one, I must have found my groove because it all came together exactly how I wanted it to, even better than I thought that it might. And I 100% love this card. So if you have been admiring a style or a technique that you're not sure, you're going to love, or you're going to be able to, feel super confident in, I want to encourage you to try it anyway, especially if you're not filming it to share with the world. You literally have nothing to lose except maybe some cardstock and some ink. But this was really fun, and it's fun to just change things up and try something different. Every once in a while, I start to feel a little stagnant. Things start to feel really repetitive. And so I love the idea of, breaking out a project like this that really kind of pushes me to try something different. So I'm putting together my mug. I just kind of put all of the pieces in place first, and then laid down that center one with foam tape. So everything else was kind of just, a placeholder. And then I'm adding these little slivers of foam tape to each section and just working my way from the center to the right and then from the center to the left. And I'm going to add the whipped cream that I colored up with my warm grays and a little bit of a creamy E marker to the back of my mug with some liquid glue. I'm just laid my pumpkin up there. It's not glued down. You did miss that part. Don't worry. But I needed a sentiment and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I started by filling in some Copic Express It scrap that I had with my YR18 that we used a lot on that pumpkin. And I'm stamping 2 different options because I wasn't sure if I wanted something that was very like tall or not. So both of these sentiments come from a honeybee stamp set that I'll link down below. And one says pick your poison and the other one says eat, drink, and be scary. And I stamped them with a distress ink. And then I went in on top of that with an embossing ink. And I had prepped everything with anti-static magic brush. Please ignore the fly that's flying back and forth across my screen. And then I am embossing this in a distress embossing powder. And this is Rusty Hinge, but it's like translucent. So it does give a tint, but you can see the ink underneath. And because I used a distress ink, it's a little splotchy. And I love how this turned out. I'll hold it up so you can see how it's not like solid. It's not a solid stamping, but it's still so legible because of how dark it is and how glossy the embossing powder turned out. So I'm going to start assembling all of the little accessory pieces onto my mug. So this little pumpkin vine is going to go on, and then we're going to tuck one leaf up at the top. We're going to end up tucking the other 2 leaves down on the bottom left. I'm decided to go with pick your poison, but it was too orange to go up in that top corner because I have that big old brown splotch up there. So I did ink up the edges with just a little bit more of the distress ink that was left on that sponge. I added that into place with some foam, and then I'm going in with a liquid glue for my mug. I'm pretty sure that was foam. I could be wrong. You guys just saw it. You know what I did. So liquid glue under the mug, liquid glue on the little leaves. I'm just tucking those under. I needed my tweezers to help me pry up that little corner to get that situated into place. And then I wanted to ground my mug. I kind of wish I had done this beforehand so I could get around those leaves easier, but it turned out very cute. I'm going in with some very dark E markers, like E89, E87, and then I think it's like E83 or 4. And I'm just basically drawing a line under my mug and then pulling those shadows down and out so that it makes it kind of look like it's set on a little table. It's not just floating in space. And my last step here was to add some of these really fun pumpkin sequins. Flat, what are these? Confetti sequins. This calls for confetti. They're perfect. They're the most perfect orange color. So I'm going to just add a scattering of those, and you can see how much they shine and how cool they look with the mulled cider, like orange shimmery spots in the background too. This card just makes me so happy. I am a pumpkin spice latte girl for life. No regrets. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope this inspires you to get a little spooky and messy this season too. I'll see you guys back here soon. And until next time, happy crafting.